Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my poplar trees. These trees were grown from seed, I guess. They just grew in this pot all by themselves, volunteer seedlings. The first video on these trees is in 2020, so they're at least 4 years old, maybe 5. Last year I cut all the trees back. They grew really tall. I cut them back, and then over the last summer they grew really tall again. So today I'm going to be pruning them and repotting them. Here is a look at my largest poplar. There's a little one beside it, and then there's one back in here also. So they grew, really well over the summer. You can see how tall they are. It goes almost to the roof of the greenhouse. So my first step, I'll be pruning them up. And what inspired me to grow these poplars as bonsai is I visited that full-size poplar that really inspired me. I'll show you a quick clip of that tree. So let's go have a look at the base of the tree now. Here it is. So you can see the roots, they're nicely kind of radial, quite thick and columnar. The one vein starts at the ground and goes all the way up, and then it's kind of fused in with the trunk. And I think this tree is several trees fused together. It sure looks like it anyway. You can see kind of the individual trees at the base, and then they kind of blend together as the tree goes up. And you can see that root, it's like a ribbon root. It's very pronounced, kind of narrow and very buttressed. So there's a look at the bark. It's very rough. It's like alligator skin almost. Really interesting. Here's the younger bark, smooth, and it's turning to rough bark. Almost looks like a willow in that view. And there's looking up at the tree, all the fine branch ramification, all keeping that kind of 30-degree angle. There's a lot of deadwood on the tree. There's a dead branch there. Look at the thickness of this branch. It's really muscular looking, smooth, and it's just kind of starting to go rough. Really interesting, and I like the color of the bark. It's kind of like a reddish tan color. Really nice, a beautiful tan, maybe a greenish tan color. So there's all those trunks fused and the rough bark. There's the bark starting to go from smooth to rough. Really looks nice at that stage. Very unique. There's another dead shoot going up. Here's a look at all those suckers on the ground. They're all over the place. There's even one here that looked like it grew into a fairly large tree. Someone's cut it off. And it actually looks like it might be 2 trees fused together. Yeah, if you look at the top here, you can see there's 2 trees. They're fused together, and there's kind of a line between them. So it shows that they do fuse together. You can, get a bunch of young seedlings and fuse them together to create quite a nice tree. Yeah, a very inspiring tree. There's a last look at that nice trunk, buttress trunk, going up to all that fine branching and ramification. And there's no real, central apex. It's just more of a broom style. So wow, that full-size tree really inspired me to grow these poplars as a bonsai, trying to get that upright shape to all the branch structure. It should be quite a challenge. Poplars are a fairly short-lived tree, but they will live to at least probably 150 years, and that's plenty long enough for me. I'm going to begin by pruning the trees up. So I cut the top off, and you can see there's a bit that died back, and then I got branches each side. There's actually 4 branches. There's 2 on this side and 2 on this side. So I need to pick a new leader for the tree, which I think will be this one. It's high up and it's the most vertical one. And then the thicker one here will become a branch. And on this side, I've got the 2 branches. I'll show you a close-up of it. My battery died on the camera, so I missed my first cut, which was right here. I took that tall branch off. There's a bud coming out the side here, so that'll be the new branch leader. And then I wanted to grow this thin one as my trunk leader, and this one will be a branch. So I'm looking for a bud on that side that faces outwards. And the first one I have is way up here, which is a little tall, and there's some dormant buds in here. So I'm going to prune it back to here, just like that. And then I've got this thin branch on the inside here, and I'm going to remove that totally. I just don't want a branch going that vertical in that section of the tree. So that one is going to come off like that. And then my leader, I don't want it, you know, I would prefer it to subdivide a bit. Otherwise I could just let it grow and kind of blend in with the main trunk more, but I think that'll come with time. So I'm just going to pick a point, and I think I'll leave it fairly tall. I'll prune it off way up here, taking the top off. So that's got this tree pruned up. The little tree here just has one little branch coming off of it, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And then the one at the back, I'm just going to prune the branches back. I've got my leader here, my trunk leader, so I'll prune this branch back to here, and this one can be pruned back to here, leaving the two branches and the leader. So that has got the pruning done. There is how long the leader was on that poplar. Very vigorous, fast-growing tree. In the same pot here, I have a birch tree growing, and normally I would just prune the birch when it's in leaf, but I'm going to do a little pruning on it today. I'm not really concerned if this tree lives or not. I have lots of birch seedlings growing, so I'll take it off here, just taking the top off the tree. And back here I've got a few red maples. I'll just take the tops off them. Keep them, you know, small and under control so they don't grow too large. So that's got the pruning done in this pot now. So the next step is the repotting. Before I start the repotting, I'm just going to seal my cuts with rubber cement on the poplar, just to help prevent dieback, so the tips don't dry out, and on the birch here, like that. All right, here I go, trying to lift everything out. It's coming out quite easily. And they were just growing in some plastic tray I found at the thrift store. I'll begin raking away the moss, trying to find the root base of these poplars. I have no idea what this root system will look like. And I don't know if this young tree here is connected to the larger tree with the root, like if it's a sucker or if it's a separate seedling that grew. I'm sure this poplar has quite a root system because they're such fast-growing trees that it must have, you know, a big root system that matches the top of the tree. Because I do want to cut the root system off to make it more compact, but I'm just wondering where to cut. I don't want to kind of just blindly cut in there. Although I guess I could. I could just kind of, like I'm collecting a tree, cut a perimeter around it. It's snowing outside. We're in for some cool weather, and then next week it warms up again. And we got a lot of snow last night. It covered the ground, and it melted, and now it's snowing again. Yeah, so I'm wondering if I should just, you know, do like a collected tree, cut around a perimeter around the tree to separate it. I think if I try and rake it away, the roots might get damaged too much. I'm noticing, you know, from the root raking, the outer layer of the roots comes off quite easily. So I think I'll do that. I think I'm going to do some cutting. So I will go around the tree in a circle, cutting through everything. This is a really good way to dull sharp pruners, by the way, cutting through soil. But pruners can be sharpened. It's more important to get the trees out. Okay, so there is the first poplar separated. So I will take that to my tub of water and I'm going to see what the root system's like. So I'm going to kind of comb and get the soil removed in the tub of water. I won't take the camera outside because it's pretty nasty out there. So I'll be back. We'll have a look at this root system first and then I'll work on separating the other poplar. Here is a look at the root system on the poplar. So for a tree that's never been root pruned in its life, it's pretty good looking root system. So I found this little tree here is a separate tree. Originally I thought it was fused, but then as I was combing the roots out, I was wiggling it and it was just sort of tangled in there. So it also has, you know, the start of a fairly good root system. So I think I'll get that other poplar out and I'll make a 3-tree planting out of it. So when I was doing that root pruning, there were a lot of roots from the other trees that were intertwined with the root system. It took me a long time to get that tree bare rooted in my tub of water. I would say it took about half an hour. So I'm just cutting out my third poplar here. And I think that was a good approach, cutting it out. I mean, you don't want roots way out anyway. I'm sure that little poplar that was growing beside the larger tree would have fused with it eventually. I would think the roots would fuse together. Because that full-size tree I was looking at, it looked like it had a fused root, or a fused trunk on it. It looked like several trees that had grown up in a clump and then fused together. So I'm sure you could make a fusion bonsai out of poplars. If you grew a bunch of little seedlings or cuttings together. Getting there. So with the root combing on the poplars, the roots aren't too fragile, they're fairly tough. Didn't seem to be damaging them much, raking the soil out from the roots. Okay, so there's my third poplar out, so I will bare root that and be back. I have got the third tree bare rooted, here it is. So one thing I noticed with these roots is the soil was in that pot was down to about here, and the roots seem to prefer growing along the surface of the soil. They don't go deep into the soil. You can see this one, how flat a root base is, even though the pot was, you know, at least this deep with soil. So they can definitely go in flatter pots. So I'm going to begin the root pruning now, and I'll start with the largest tree here. Okay, I'm having a look at the roots. So there's not a lot of roots here, but there's some fine roots forming. That must have been the edge of the pot. So I'll begin by pruning some of these longer roots back. So I've got some subdivision here, so I'm going to prune this one back on an angle that's parallel with the surface of my soil. So when the new roots grow in, they kind of blend in nicely with the existing root. This one you can see is really thick. The radial direction is kind of here, so I'm going to prune it off right here. Making an angled cut like that. This one kind of comes out, here's my radial direction, and it's kind of cranked over, so I'm at least going to remove this section of it. I've got it dividing from 1 to 2 here, so I'm just going to prune that off like this. It's not perfectly radial, but it's, you know, better better than nothing, I guess. I'm pruning these roots back, making them a little more compact. Now I've got a root here, it's pretty radial, but then it goes quite snake-like, which, you know, isn't bad, but I'll reduce this one back. There's one growing underneath this other root that I'll prune back with my other scissors so I can get in there. Like that. Then this snake-like one, I've got to reduce it back. It's getting quite long and thick with not a lot of subdivision in it. So I think in this case, because it's so parallel, I might have to do an angular cut. So coming up from below like this. Like that, cutting it off. We'll see what happens to these roots. There's another thick one coming off here. It sticks up, so this part of the root flows down into the soil and then it sticks up, so I'm going to take the end off. Like that. So that kind of gets the major surface roots pruned. I'll do a little profile pruning to some of these little roots here. Just cleaning the cuts up on them, making them a little more compact. This one on top of the root there I can take away. There's a root growing here that this one's crossing. I think I'm going to prune this one back. And then this one where it sticks up, I'll prune back. Like that. There's one going out the bottom I can prune off. A few here. And this one's sticking up. And this one is too. And I think that has that one root pruned. I mean, it's not... Oh, there's one up high here I can take off. Yeah, it's not bad. It's a pretty good looking root system, actually. So that is ready for planting. Let's get out the second largest tree here now. This one. And there's one growing on a weird angle from the bottom I can take off. It's a root from some other. This one can be shortened. 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 This root, I don't think it's from this tree. I think it's just tangled in there, yeah. This one's kind of sticking up. I'm going to prune it back. Root hair sticking up that I'm pruning away. This one isn't very radial. I'm going to prune it back. There's one too high here. One growing on the bottom. There's a root that died off here. I don't know what happened to it. I'm going to prune the dead bit away. Maybe it dried out or something. That's too long. This one's too long. Okay, I think that's good for the second tree. Pretty good looking root base too. And the third and final tree. Oh, this is, yeah. Well, I can take this one off. I'm not even sure how healthy these roots are. just take the tip off this one. This one's kind of growing up, but there's nothing else on this side, so I'll just take the upper part off there. And I think that's all I can do. It's not very vigorous. It has a thin shoot here, just a few roots. So that'll do though. I think that's got the 3 trees ready for planting. Now I've got to pick out a pot for these trees. I've picked out this pot for the tree. I think it's a good training pot to get the trees growing. It's large enough that, you know, each of the trees has a bit of room. Has some drainage holes in it. I think that'll do quite nicely. So I'll get the pot ready for planting. I'll get some drainage screens in and a base layer of soil. Now I was wondering if I should seal these roots with a bit of rubber cement. I'm going to try it. I don't think it would hurt. They're fairly large cuts. I don't know how well it'll stick to the, you know, that watery, fleshy roots, but it can't hurt. Okay, in goes my soil. I'll put a base layer on the bottom of the pot. Now, how high is that? Yeah, that's pretty good. So I don't know if there's a front to this pot. I don't think there is. But there will be a front to the tree. So this was my leader. So I'm going to leave this stub on the tree until this grows stronger, and then eventually I'll cut it back so it heals over nice and smooth. But for now, I'm going to leave it on. So my root base, where is the nicest part of the root base? I don't know, maybe here. I think here. So I'll put this towards the front. Maybe right about there. And then the second tree, the leader's here. Oh, there's a root I missed on the bottom there. Got that one off. Second tree, I'll put it over this side. Somewhere there. And the third tree can go in right back here. That gives each tree a bit of room. It's not a bad looking planting. Let's just look at it from the front. Kind of creating a bit of space between here. That looks fine. These trees are just in training, so the arrangement doesn't matter too much at this point. However, if those roots do become fused together, you know, maybe it'll be hard to separate them in the future and rearrange them. So I might as well get something fairly pleasing to start off with. All right, so I'll start filling them in with soil now. So make sure my tree is vertical. And those 3 trees are planted now, so I can give them a water. All right, here I go with the watering. So we'll see if we can turn these into really cool poplar bonsai. I hope so, because seeing that full-size tree was very inspiring. I really like the form of the poplar. Very unique looking tree. And it should be a fairly easy to grow tree, I think. As long as I keep them watered, they should be happy. I'll spin the trees around so you can see them from all angles. So here I go. And back somewhere to the front. There are no poplar trees in my neighborhood. I can't even think where the nearest poplar is. Maybe the seeds flew in from that tree I showed you at the start of the video. But they flew into the bonsai zone, germinated, and now I have them underway as a bonsai. So that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the bonsai zone.